Whenever I think I need a bit more enthusiasm, all you have to do is go out to the favourite spot where you know where the curlews are hanging out, and you can sit there and watch them for half an hour just plodding around, and it gives me enough renewed enthusiasm to get me going for the whole next 6 months of work.
I've been told in the past only a mother could love them, that they're ugly, but beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and I think they're a magnificent bird.
Bush Stone-curlew is a pretty big bird for a woodland bird. It's quite high, 50 to 60 centimetres tall, really camouflaged feathers and amazing big yellow eyes that really stand out from a long way away.
I've pretty much been around Bush Stone-curlews all my life. The two properties that we've lived on in my 50 plus years have both supported wild Bush Stone-curlews, so I've never actually known a time when there wasn't a Bush Stone-curlew down the paddock.
I would have seen my first curlew in 1972 when I married Nev, and since then we've had the privilege of seeing them nearly every year. They're so unusual, I suppose, like they're ground-dwelling birds, they're secretive.
They're so interesting, and I don't know, to me they've got so much personality. And
not many of them around. I suppose that's part of what the fascination is, just to try to get more of them around in our landscape. You hear all the stories of how they used to be around, but now they've just about gone from southeastern Australia.
I've grown up with curlews in this country, and they've always been a bit mysterious and interesting. And they became quite scarce. In fact, they vanished from this property.
I think they're rather unique. There's nothing else like it in the grassy box woodland in Australia that I know of.
Yeah, they are very inquisitive and very wary. They've got amazing personalities for birds. You know, they've been known to do all sorts of bizarre things, you know, like become really accustomed to people, and then other birds are really wary and you can't get anywhere near them. So there's definitely a lot of personality differences between birds, and they can be real characters. You know, there's been some tame birds that have, you know, really become part of the family and done some amazing, cool stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue, I suppose, and it's the mystery, I suppose, that's part of the deal.
Bush Stone-curlew has a fairly unmistakable appearance. Basically a grey and black bird in plumage, blends in very much with dead fallen timber, has long skinny legs and a beautiful big nocturnal eye that once you see it you'll never forget it.
And amazing wings. When you see them fly, they're actually a lot bigger than you realise. They've got quite a big wing length.
The sound of the Bush Stone-curlew to me is very similar to somebody being strangled or murdered, and it's really eerie, blood-curdling. I'm not going to have a crack at imitating it and make a fool of myself, but once you've heard a Bush Stone-curlew, you'll never forget the noise.
A great range of sounds and songs, and goodness knows, I don't know how many, but there's a great variety, and it can be changed with the seasons a bit.
They prefer to be out in the country, and out here where we are at the moment is ideal.
And I've personally never seen a Bush Stone-curlew in the local region. In fact, our local group has been out on many occasions, and I don't believe our records have ever shown a Bush Stone-curlew on our monthly outings. So it's very sad, it's extremely sad, and when you compare that to the northern parts of Australia, where I've been quite regularly on birding trips, and we see Bush Stone-curlews quite regularly. So we've got this quite a dichotomy between the northern part of Australia and the southern parts of Australia as far as the curlews are concerned.
It's just been such a startling, rapid decline in the species, and only in this part of the range, so they're still quite common in northern Australia. There's a couple of things that seem to be drivers of the decline. One of them is predation by foxes and perhaps cats. There's a few locations in Australia that are fox-free, like islands off the coast, and they still have quite a lot of curlews. So we think that foxes must have something to do with it. Probably more taking the chicks, rather than the parents, because the chicks can't fly for such a long period of time. I also think habitat loss is probably an issue, whether it's to do with loss of woodland remnants or even woodland remnants being cleaned up and the condition falling down for curlews. And they forage on insects and invertebrates in the landscape, so anything that's going to reduce the level of insects, so high pesticide use and things like that, I think could be a problem for their food resources.
We're trying to manage our property to enhance the habitat for the curlew. And
yeah, they like to roost in woody areas. They sort of like the protection from aerial predators from above, so they'll often roost under trees. But then on the ground they really like a lot of fallen timber and leaves. If you've ever seen a curlew up against timber, you'll realise just how well they camouflage, and that's what they rely on for avoiding predators.
The birds are long-lived birds. They'll live 28 to 30 years, but there's been no recruitment of young birds back into the wild, so all of a sudden that ageing population is dying out and the birds are disappearing.
Try and arrest some of the decline in the wild, we've started a captive breeding program, which the idea was birthed in the year 2000.
4 pairs that breed at home, so we've got them in pens, and we'll raise the babies at home and then they're weaned, and the idea being they get prepared for what we call a soft release and onto areas that have been protected from foxes, and predator control has been extensively done, and they're let go out in those areas, hopefully to go on and breed themselves in the wild and repopulate.
Well, we believe that the birds, when they leave their home territory, so the territory that they were born in, and they're often sort of, shuffled out of that territory by the parents when the parents want to nest again, when those birds move out, we think the natural behaviour is for them to flock and join these sort of mobile flocking groups where they basically join up with all the other young kids from the neighbourhood and they hang out together in an area, and we believe that that's when they do that pair bonding. So they're basically meeting all of the other juveniles in the area, having a bit of a curlew B&S ball equivalent where they all get together, find out who they're interested in, and then from there, after 1 to 2 years of flocking in that group, they'll move off and create their own territory with their chosen partner. And they will generally partner very long term, often for life, unless something happens to one of the mates. If something does happen to their mate, then they will often take on another bird as a mate, but generally if nothing happens to either of them, they'll be together for their whole life, so 20 to 30 years generally.
well, we've got five breeding aviaries, so 5 pairs, and 5 active breeding pairs, which we're harvesting the progeny, accumulating them in a release site, and we're releasing on a yearly basis into this environment, which is pretty good curlew country.
They lay their eggs on the ground, they make a small kind of nest, or it's more just a scrape in the ground amongst the leaves, and they just lay 2 to 3 eggs, usually 2 eggs on the ground, and both the male and female swap incubating the eggs, so they take turns.
They do remarkably well in an altered environment, providing they've got roost sites.
And so lots of fallen timber, lots of leaves where they can camouflage in well at the ground level, but yeah, in a woodland so that they've got that cover from above. So that's where they'll roost during the day, and being nocturnal, they spend most of their activity at night time, and that's when they do all their feeding. And they do that in more open areas, so they will do a bit of feeding in woodlands, but lots of grassland, open pastures, ploughed paddocks, big open areas. They tend to walk and forage at night time.
Yeah, this is ideal habitat with plenty of fallen timber, and it's lightly timbered. So this would be roost site particularly, and probably foraging area.
It's been a pretty steep learning curve in that we've had to learn from the ground up. There hasn't been anybody else to follow. So we've gone from a group of people who knew very little, or not much at all, to now being able to successfully get a reasonable number of chicks to survive and ultimately released.
We've protected 2 areas, one where we have the breeding aviaries, which is 18 acres site with feral cat and foxproof fence, and then another site which is 50 acres, which includes a wetland function, so that's where we've got our release aviary, so all the releases are done at that site. Initially they've got an area to wander into that is free of the introduced predators.
So the aim of the program is to release these 10 to 15 birds every year, try and bring the population back up to a level close to what it would have been before the decline started.
Peter's now getting the bird out of the box. It's been sitting in there getting a sample collected for health testing. We are now going to put leg bands on and weigh them, and the transmitters. This transmitter is a style we're doing under the tail. This will enable us to monitor where the birds go when we release them. It'll be picked up by the antenna Peter has on the receiver, and that will follow the bird around out in the wild, and they'll be able to make sure it's still alive and going well. Where it's going to feed, generally they'll have the transmitters will have a life expectancy between 2 and 3 months, and the range of 2 to 3 kilometres. The bird moults each year, and when that happens the transmitter will detach when it grows new feathers.
Well, the captive breeding program's been really interesting. I've spent over 50 years of my life observing wild birds, but due to their nature they're jolly hard to observe in the wild and learn a lot.
We play a recording of the curlew through a megaphone, and that can attract the birds so that they can be monitored in that way. It's not 100% reliable, but it can be a useful tool. More often than not they will reply to the call even if you don't see the bird.
First curlew chick that we hatched in captivity we were absolutely over the moon with, and since then we've been able to achieve 2 eggs hatching and being successfully reared, which is extremely hard. And yeah, every time we go out to the pens and there's a new chick hatched, it gives us a glow.
There's some basic land management practices that they can do, which a lot of farmers already do. One of them is definitely that predator control, so keeping a tab on foxes and cats and predators in their areas. So we really promote fox baiting, spotlighting, all aspects of predator control. A couple of the other things that we promote is the leaving of fallen timber and the leaving sort of messy, untidy paddocks. Because that's exactly what curlew's like, and it's not just for the camouflage but for the food resources. There's a whole suite of invertebrates and all sorts of animals that use fallen timber and leaf litter. Oh,
it's extremely rewarding. It's very time consuming, but it's very rewarding.
Look, I think it's just absolutely fantastic what the working group have done in regard to this curlew project. The results are starting to show on the board, which is fantastic for all involved.
I think it's really, really important. I think what the landholders and the Nature Conservation Working Group is committed to here is a phenomenal undertaking, and is really already given us so much to the curlew project that we wouldn't have got otherwise.